viewers of Sheppard TV, welcome to a new episode of the Sheppard Show, which you are being forced to watch at this exact moment. Today's episode is going to be all about gamification in the Air Force. You may not know, eSports has been growing at an exponential rate over the last at least 2 to 5 years. I think it's like $1 billion industry
over
right
that now, but yeah.
We just want to talk about how the Air Force can use that and apply it to recruiting and other applications, specifically in the pilot training environment. Before we jump straight into that, we need to introduce who we are. I'm the video guy here at Sheppard Public Affairs, Ben Rimmer.
My name's James. I draw stuff.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Gary Moore, go by call sign Jam, a former A-10 pilot and now an IFF instructor at the 80th Operations Group.
And I'm Bo, the IT/gamer nerd.
Yeah, so gamification, if you don't know, is basically doing a complicated thing learning a complicated thing or practicing a complicated thing using video games, right? And that's essentially what you guys do over in the Spark Cell. You're practicing pilot training through the use of VR technology, right?
Correct.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to kind of open up with is we know that, right, like we wish it was going to be peaceful all the time. It's not going to be. We know there's a new war coming. Recently, like the Air Force has made some changes on like, I don't know what you would call it, like rules, I guess. It seems like we're changing the rules on certain things just in the way that we like live.
Right, you know, they can have their hands in their pockets now.
Right, did you know these kids can have their hands in their pockets? I say that Ben all the time. But, so that's kind of a silly thing, but like with the war that's coming, do you think somebody with like an extensive gaming skill set, is that gonna be something that is like valuable to the Air Force in the future versus like when you were coming up, nobody was thinking about that, right?
Yeah, I always use the analogy of in terms of how we're learning, right? So flying aircraft, very complicated, lots of button switches, which by the way, are also on what we call the hands-on throttle and stick, right? So as I'm flying that aircraft, I can maneuver all kinds of things and parts of the avionics in the aircraft by touching things with my fingers, just like I would a gaming controller, right? And so I always use the analogy of if I'm playing a game on my Xbox and I'm using those switches and buttons, and now I'm maybe gonna play that same game on another device, PlayStation, iPad, whatever it may be, same game, same controls, but now I'm having to figure out how to do all that, right?
Sure.
So I think some of that brain power, kind of like you're talking about, it does translate or could translate as we go into the future as systems become more complex, 5th generation aircraft, F-35s and so on, right?
Yeah, I want to talk about that actually later in the show about like what the aircraft looks like, but we'll save that for later.
So we're about out of time for this first segment. If we don't cut it off, we will get in trouble. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up this conversation about gamification. See you in a minute.
Bo, I know you do a lot of you basically troubleshoot and set up the simulators for pilots to come in and fly aircraft, right?
Yeah, I mean.
Essentially like the condensed version. I know there's more to it than that. But,
Yeah.
do you think somebody like looking at that kind of work, like as the military looks to put people in those kinds of jobs in the future, do you think it's more important for somebody, like is it important for somebody to have a gaming background? Because I know you have an extensive gaming background. Do you think that makes your job easier because you already have that skill set? Or do you think somebody could walk in to what you're doing and you could basically show them the ropes and they could take off and do it?
I think both are kind of true simultaneously in that it definitely has helped me in stepping into this position, knowing all of that stuff, because a lot of it is modification of the software.
Right, like basically modding.
Yeah, very similar to what you would do with games.
If you write mods for Skyrim.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's literally, that was on my resume. Like, no joke.
Yeah.
That was on my resume.
Well, even like the new Skyrim, like all the community mods, like the new version of Skyrim is being released with all those mods. Like,
yep.
the community.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And so it was definitely easier for me But we also used to have somebody on the contract that was not a big gamer. And so having him step into that position, Alex and I, who are both gamers, were able to show him exactly what we're doing, and he was able to pick it up just as easily.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think it helps. It certainly helped me. So.
Okay.
Cool. And then real quick, for people who don't know what the Spark Cell is, can you give like an extremely brief description of that?
Yeah, so, and just to be, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but so it was called the Spark Cell, and now the Innovation Division. We've kind of stepped up our game a little bit, right? Evolved, right?
The Innovation Division.
The Innovation Division, and so I'm the chief of the Innovation Division at the 80th Operations Group, and so, but part of that evolvement in terms of how we have grown was simply because, again, we've seen this tech, we've seen it work, and we're starting to see results in terms of how the students are performing when they're flying the actual aircraft, as a result of the extra practice repetitions and so on that they're getting in the immersive training devices, our VR simulators, right? So now as the Innovation Division has continued to evolve and we're integrating more of this formally into our training syllabi, so now we're to the point where we're, again, having guys like Bo and Alex on board who do have the gaming background. And again, a lot of the tech we're using is commercial off the shelf. So most of what I can purchase, if you walk down to our Innovation Division, you'll see all that tech. I could go on Amazon and pretty much order all of it today.
Right. I was gonna ask that. Like, if you're a kid right now, and you're not really thinking about becoming a pilot, but you're like really awesome, like you're like the baddest guy on Microsoft Flight Simulator. Is there a chance that like
Last Starfighter?
Right. Hey, I was going to ask about that when we talk about recruiting.
Let's take a break right there, and we'll just pick back up at Last Starfighter. We'll see you guys here shortly after the next content you're about to see.
Okay.
Hi, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed all of that cool information. We were just talking about the Last Starfighter in the last segment. We're just going to pick right back up from there. So for people who may not know, what is the Last Starfighter?
Yeah, so The Last Starfighter was a movie in like the 80s where essentially aliens drop off an arcade cabinet, and if you score high enough on the arcade cabinet, the aliens come down because you're like the best pilot in the galaxy. Total reality base here. That being said, I know like one of the initiatives with General Wills with changing access to rated positions and rated diversity for the next generation of pilots, UPT 2.5 and so on. Do you think that there's any, I don't know what the word would be there, but like, is there any credibility in like using gamification as a recruitment tool for pilots in the future?
Yeah, great question. That's one of the things that we're definitely looking at. We're actually currently, we work a lot with the industry itself, and that's one of the great things that in terms of the current operations we've got down in the Innovation Division, for example, with some of our software, again, this commercial off-the-shelf software we're using, for example, our T-38s that we're flying. So we have a T-38 flight sim model that we're using in our VR sims. And if we've got an issue, or we're going to change something or adjust something, I can message that guy on Discord and say, hey, can you change X to Y, right? And he'll and 2 days later we've got a new software load, and so which is awesome. So one of the things, so that said, one of the things we're working with in industry is, hey, can we develop a system that think video game, where we can use it for pilot training, but maybe that can bleed over into the gaming world as well, right? So, the Air Force has a gaming league and teams.
Yeah, we were going to talk about eSports is huge.
Exactly right. And so now can we blend into that and now have kind of two parallel universes, if you will. One we're using for training while having a lot of fun with the gamification like we're talking about, and now potentially a whole separate thing where guys can use that same game, fly against each other, have a fight to the death in an F-16 and a F-22, whatever aircraft they want to choose.
Right.
And now we can access that and kind of use that to maybe potentially as a recruiting tool, go out, have some fun, and then by the way, for actual
it's
training.
Legitimately,
yeah, absolutely.
And you guys are starting to get some of the numbers back on like how fast, like it's improving performance in pilots by the time they get in the aircraft as far as familiarization. I know you probably don't
and
have like hard numbers.
And speeding up the process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just had a recent class go through what we call our small group tryouts. So they were at a formal syllabus that integrated about 20 of the virtual reality events into their formal training syllabus. And what we saw there, they actually had the best what we call check ride scores. So think sort of like, final exams for each phase, right? The best scores in a year and a half. And they actually required about half the number of repeated rides. So the way pilot training works is if you kind of have a block of training, if you don't meet the standard, well then you kind of have to redo that ride.
Yeah, and that translates into like saving money on jet fuel, instructor time, and things like that too.
Absolutely.
Well, I remember like the cost of one of those simulators is what, like an hour in a T-38 or something like that?
Yeah, so probably rough numbers, a flying hour in a T-38, let's call it around $3,500 to operate and maintain a T-38. Whereas our simulators are probably in the $20,000-$25,000 each. So call it maybe say 10 flying hours. But again, we already saw with this previous class that we potentially could save hundreds of flying hours over the course of syllabi training, of formal syllabus training, and so obviously it's going to pay for itself as we
Gas
look at that.
prices are going up though.
That's right.
Yeah, they are. Okay, great. We got to take a quick break again. We'll be right back for the next segment, and this is the part where I turn the audio off and music's playing, so we can say anything we want.
Yeah.
Hi, welcome back to the next segment of the Sheppard Show, where we're talking about everything gamification. James?
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to ask you, Bo, in your time over in the Sparksell, and I remember we did quite a bit of stuff with virtual reality and public affairs a couple years ago, and it was really frustrating trying to get over the hump in terms of like buying technology, how we're utilizing it. So now that you've been doing that for a while and you've seen the Air Force making a valiant effort to push this through.
Accelerate, change, or fail, right?
Right, exactly right. Do you have any like quick things that maybe we could improve on, or things that we're just not, things that we're missing because maybe the wrong community's looking at that right now, like how we can help them get there quicker?
So I think one of the pitfalls that we've probably stricken is like a lot of this stuff is proprietary. So we have to go through Microsoft or Lockheed Martin or Milviz or some other company to provide a lot of this stuff. And those can present like roadblocks on occasion.
Right, because you got to be a government contract to.
Yeah, there's so much red tape a lot of times. Purchase agreements, all kinds of stuff that gets in the way. And I think one of the things that could be really beneficial is actually training people to develop software and
100%.
Learning management systems, actually look into 3D printing hardware and actually manufacturing this stuff, training enlistees or officers, whatever the choice may be, but internalizing a lot of the innovation rather than outsourcing it to companies through contracts.
Yeah, that's what we found too, 100% agree. I think it's this case of like, the dumb analogy I always use, but this is the only way I knew to explain it, is that if you have a special forces, bear with me, if you have a special forces section in the military, they operate under special rules, right? Because they have a special job that they have to do. If you're building software for the military, I realize that we've got a lot of restrictions in terms of like what we can do with comm and purchase and stuff like that, but maybe for that small section that's building video games so that we can train pilots or maintainers or whatever it is, maybe they need to live in a different place on base and have a special set of rules. That makes sense to me. And I'm sure they're looking at that because they're all smarter than I am. But.
Yeah, and one of the things we're looking at, again, we're talking about, again, this gamification and specifically in the pilot training environment, right? And again, obviously what we do here in the 80th is train fighter pilots for our nation's air forces. We have 14 NATO partners. But one of the things we're really looking at is integrating not just, again, the T6 and T-38, what we have here, but again, potentially building that out and now adding F-35s and F-22s and all of that, right? And I can imagine, again, essentially like they have kind of in the civilian sector, is creating a similar sort of world where everybody's in sort of a virtual reality world, and now I could have F-22s up in Alaska fighting against some F-16s in Massawa in a virtual reality environment.
Yeah.
But again, obviously with that, I would need potentially, whether that's a secret or classification, and depending on what networks those are on, and now like you were mentioning, having some of those folks who are smart on all that to be able to code it, create it and kind of tweak those softwares in order to get that working.
Yeah.
We're at our time again, so we will continue this conversation. We'll be right back after the break. Okay, welcome back to another segment of the Sheppard Show. We're just going to pick up where we left off with gamification. So, Jam, I was going to ask, in the last segment we were talking about virtual reality. Do you think the Air Force and the military will ever get to a point where people will be flying fighter planes, what am I trying to say here?
Yeah, like
planes,
fighters, jets,
completely unmanned in the same way that we do UAVs, but legit like F-16s, F-22s, F-35s.
Because then you can pull out all the stuff that has to keep you alive.
G-forces and stuff like that.
Anymore,
It'd be up to the structural integrity of the aircraft at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things we've seen, even here in the innovation division, is that a lot of this technology that you're alluding to, and kind of across the board here, whether it's virtual reality technology, gaming technology, and I mean, it's going so fast, right? So, I mean, heck, the VR headsets we've got connected to our machines that we bought a year ago are already out of date,
yeah, absolutely.
right?
Oh, yeah. Right.
So now, as I look at things like internet speeds and bandwidth and those things that are getting faster and faster, I think you will here in the future have the ability to do a lot of that, because now I can integrate those systems, and again, as those technologies continue to accelerate. That said, I will say, as a fighter pilot, having flown in combat, obviously those situations are very dynamic. So to the idea of having a completely unmanned force going out and executing some sort of mission, I think could be very difficult. One of the things I know that the Air Force is looking at is essentially a scenario where you'd have maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 manned airplanes connected with kind of additional fleet of kind of like you described.
Yeah, like integrated, a little bit.
Right, exactly. And now you don't have those limitations. So maybe now these 3 aircraft are 9G limited, but the other aircraft that are flying with them, carrying the weapons, missiles, bombs, and so on, are sort of unlimited, if you will, in terms of the
kind of like mules, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah, it is.
And so those aircraft, the manned aircraft, can then control the other ones in a kind of an integrated network. That's some of the things they're looking at. So, but again, as that technology accelerates, and I definitely think something like that will be available in the future.
Awesome.
So what I wanted to ask about that, and Bo, you can kind of jump in here. Like, I know that, so there's probably games, I know you play like that Star Citizen game, like you play games where like you're flying stuff. If you learn to fly a ship in Star Citizen, and I don't know because I haven't played it, but if you learn to fly a ship, like if you can fly a ship in Star Citizen and then you buy a different kind of ship, is there like a whole different control scheme that you have to learn like there would be in real life? Like if you jump from an F-16 to an F-15, are they already kind of doing that in gaming?
Yeah, I would, in Star Citizen certainly. Like every craft is going to have its own control schemes and things like that, things you have to pay attention to.
Right.
And even like so far as to bigger ships require multiple crew members in order to operate. But something like Elite Dangerous, you can hop from one ship to the next, and it's relatively the same. The performance is different.
So that's what I wanted to ask about is, if, let's go back to this unmanned scenario, is it possible, like you're an A-10 pilot, so you don't fly F-16s, you could probably learn how to fly an F-16 way faster than I could because I'm not a pilot. If we made like a general UI, this is how you fly a plane from this console that pilots understand, and that just pilots all of our fleet, now we've got guys that can pilot multiple aircraft. You know what I mean? Like,
different
what
missions,
is that? Yeah,
and
exactly
different
right.
outloads and stuff like that.
Doing that through gamification is like in your lifetime, do you think something like that is maybe possible?
Yeah, I think you definitely could go down that route. I mean, again, like you alluded to, obviously a lot of these fighter aircraft specifically are not that different, right, in terms of the mechanics of operating those aircraft. Obviously, all of our, A-10s do play a different role than an F-22 does, and now how do I operate that and execute and employ it, or that's where it gets different. But I think you're absolutely right in terms of the controls. A lot of that is very similar. You definitely could get sort of a situation where a lot of that is very, similar, and it'd be very easy to kind of pick up from one system to the next. Kind of like you were talking about with the games, right? So, the way games are designed, I mean, they're very intuitive, and I think kind of blending that into this conversation as we're talking about is a great way to go about it, because now I can bring in, some of these systems where, guys can jump in and fire up one of these video games and very quickly off to the races, and now they're out there killing people and doing all that stuff, right?
They pick it up fast.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, once again, we're out of time for this segment. Our producer will not be nice to us if we keep going on with time. So we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back. Hello and welcome back to the next segment of the Sheppard Show, where we're talking about gamification in the Air Force. I think we're going to touch a little bit on eSports and using that as a recruitment tool.
Yeah, so basically what I wanted to start with there is like we talked about like making this software for the military and how we're basically using commercial off-the-shelf stuff. But we have the talent and the skill sets within the service to do this, whether that's civilian or enlisted. I mean, especially with people growing up with this kind of stuff, they're more tuned into it. And a lot of people probably already know this. You guys probably remember this. The Army for a lot of years was using a game like an infantry game as a recruitment tool. I forget what it was. Do you remember what it's called, Bo? It was like Army of One or something like that. I forget. You can look it up. But anyway.
Call of Duty. I don't
Yeah,
know
no,
if you've heard of it. No.
Maybe you've heard of it, bro. It's called Call of Duty. Anyways, what I wanted to talk about is like if we were able to build something like that on our own, and we could drop that on Twitch and have like live competitions where
With actual pilots.
right, with actual pilots, like man, how effective would that be for 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds to be able to look at that and be like, oh, I could actually do this for a job.
And possibly potentially open up the doors for more people to be pilots.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there is a pilot shortage right now.
Right.
And just sparking that interest early on.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah, we've talked about that, and Bo came up with a great idea of creating like a, kind of almost like one of those eSports gaming training centers, essentially, on our campus here locally,
Yeah.
where we could have guys in there playing video games, and then kind of have some stands in the back where guys could watch them, and again, cool, fun environment, but also we're actually training pilots, right? So,
Yeah.
two guys going to head-to-head in sort of an air-to-air competition, see who can shoot the other one down. And then just like you said, if I could put that, open it up, sort of some sort of public environment where now these guys could fight, a civilian could fight against a real live fighter pilot.
Yeah, that would
and
be awesome.
And that would be me if I'll tell you what, fighter pilots, we're a bunch of competitive folks, right? So
Yeah.
I would love to go in there and see if I can beat some of these guys. And
Yeah, for
especially if I
sure.
hear some guy, this guy, is on Twitch who's like awesome. Let me see if I can go beat him.
Call
Right,
sign
you're not-
Maverick.
Yeah, you're not awesome in an A10, bro. Sorry about your life. Excuse me, almost died. What I think would also be cool, I talked about this years ago, but like, how cool would it be to be able to like, because now we're gathering all this information, right? Like the pilots that are using this now, we have all this information where, if you have like an insane standout, or even if you don't, like you could build in stats for like Chuck Yeager, like fly against Chuck Yeager virtually, right? I don't know. I just think stuff like that would be cool, like where you could do like time trials versus Chuck Yeager or
Yeah, and they're already starting to look at that too. We talked about some of the tech that the Air Force is already looking at, like an AI sort of fighter pilot, right?
Yeah.
And create an AI enemy fighter out there and see if I can go fight against that guy and see if I can beat him, right? So which is, oh, by the way, going to push some of the technologies, all the things we've been talking about, right? The technology and the research to go into that, and now I get to go fly against that guy and see if I can go kill him in this virtual world, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. All right, I think that's all we have for the show today. I think we covered a lot of awesome stuff, and maybe you think about gamification in eSports a little differently than you did
Yeah,
before, but
I think it's something that the military has definitely identified is going to be super useful and effective for, the foreseeable future.
the foreseeable future, for sure.
So if you're, a kid at home and you absolutely love video games, that doesn't mean that you can't be a badass pilot.
Be all that you can be.
Yeah, wrong branch, bud.
But
Amen.
anyway,
Thanks for joining
sir,
us.
yeah, appreciate your time, Bo. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time on the next Sheppard Show.